Hello everybody, today we're taking an updated look at the 2020 presidential election map between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. It's been a little over 2 weeks since my last video regarding my personal forecast, and so I thought it was long overdue that I update it for you guys. A lot has happened since the last video was uploaded, especially with the 538 releasing their swing state polling averages. As for the two campaigns, Joe Biden is narrowing his VP choice down to just a few candidates, and Trump reignited himself on the campaign trail in Tulsa. So let's see how all of these developments have impacted the 2020 electoral map. So let's start out by labeling all of these safe states for both the Donald Trump and the Joe Biden campaign. Starting out with the safe Republican states in the 2020 election, we have Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska's two at-large electoral votes, as well as their 1st and 3rd congressional districts, in Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Louisiana, Missouri, Alabama, and the state of Alaska. So these are all of the safe states for Donald Trump and the Republican Party in the 2020 election as things stand at this moment. They hold 95 electoral votes. So 95 electoral votes are safe for Donald Trump in the 2020 election. Now moving on to the states that are safe for the Democratic Party and for Joe Biden across the West Coast in Washington, Oregon, California, and Hawaii, as well as New York, Illinois, and across the Northeast in DC, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and the state of Vermont, as well as Maine's 1st congressional district. So as you can see, Joe Biden has a significant edge in terms of safe states over Donald Trump. He held 183 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 95, as things stand right now, for the safe states for either campaign. Now, the first thing you might have looked at this map and noticed is that I didn't label Missouri, Indiana, and South Carolina as safe states for the Republicans, even though Donald Trump won in all 3 of these states by safe margins in 2016. I am labeling these 3 states as likely in favor of Donald Trump because I do believe that these states will go to Donald Trump by over 10 points in the 2020 election. However, I can't comfortably label them as completely safe because I want to point out that Missouri, Indiana, and South Carolina are 3 states that were competitive in the 2008 election, and a couple of them were competitive in the 2012 election. Now keep in mind, Barack Obama won in the state of Indiana in 2008, and he came extremely close, about 0.3% in Missouri. That was the margin of victory for John McCain over Barack Obama. So that's just to keep in mind that these 3 states aren't necessarily as safe as a state like Wyoming, Montana, South Dakota, Kansas, all of those, but they're more than likely, almost certainly going to go to Donald Trump. Now for the states that I consider likely in favor of Joe Biden. I would consider the state of New Mexico likely for Joe Biden, as in the state of Colorado, and in Minnesota, as well as the state of Virginia. So these are the 4 states that I would comfortably label, as well as Maine's 2 at-large electoral votes. Now keep in mind, Maine, that is, and Nebraska split their electoral votes by at-large electoral votes statewide and in their congressional districts. So I do believe that Maine's 2 at-large electoral votes will be considered likely as things stand right now. Now going through these states, New Mexico could arguably be labeled as a safe state for the Democratic Party, similarly to the states of Missouri, Indiana, and South Carolina. Now, Hillary Clinton did not win in the state of New Mexico by the margin that Donald Trump won in Missouri, Indiana, and South Carolina in 2016, but polling numbers suggest that the Republican Party really does not stand much of a chance in the state of New Mexico. As for Colorado and Minnesota, the polling averages in these states are really incredible to look at. In the state of Colorado, Joe Biden is plus 17 right now in 538's polling averages, which is really rather remarkable. Now, the state of Minnesota was considered to be a lot closer, but new recent polls have Joe Biden up 17 points in the state of Minnesota, which is really rather ridiculous. It could be that on the back of the riots in Minnesota, and that being the epicenter of the riots across the country, it could very well be that Donald Trump has lost significant support in the state of Minnesota, and that is why these new polling numbers suggest Joe Biden up ahead in basically safe numbers in Minnesota. Now, do I believe that he will win by over 10 points in the state of Minnesota? Probably not. It'll probably be more around the 6 to 8 point margin. But I do believe, as things stand right now, Minnesota is a likely state for Joe Biden and the Democrats. Now, Virginia, I've mentioned over and over again before. Joe Biden is up a little over 10 points right now in polling averages. It's a state where the Republicans have not won a statewide race in over 10 years. I do believe that Joe Biden, as things stand right now, has a likely margin in the state of Virginia. Now moving on to the states that I would consider as lean in favor of the Republican Party. First off, I do believe that Maine's 2nd congressional district is lean in favor of the Republican Party. Donald Trump won by a little over 10 points in Maine's 2nd congressional district in 2016. I do believe that gap will close a little bit in 2020, but I don't believe it is enough for Joe Biden to carry Maine's 2nd congressional district as things stand right now. Now, obviously, we don't get a lot of polling in that district, but I do believe that it is a lean in favor of the Republican Party as things stand right now. I also believe that the state of Texas is considered a lean in favor of the Republican Party. Now, in the last video, I do believe I labeled it as a tilt in favor of the Republican Party. I may have actually had it as lean. I don't quite remember. You guys can probably fact check that if you want to check out the previous video that is. But I do believe that Texas, as things stand right now, is a lean in favor of the Republican Party. Now, the polling averages suggest that it is extremely close, basically a toss-up, with Donald Trump up about 1 to 2 points in polling averages in the state of Texas. However, I think it is a lot more realistic that Donald Trump defeats Joe Biden by around 4 to maybe 6 points in the state of Texas. It'll be a lot more competitive than it has been in previous elections, and it will probably be an effective toss-up by 2024. But I do believe, as things stand right now, it is a lean in favor of Donald Trump and the Republicans. As for the lean states for the Democrats, starting out in the state of Nevada, Nevada is a lean in favor of the Democratic Party. Now, Joe Biden isn't polling as well there as I think many people would have probably assumed. I think a lot of people associate the state of Nevada and Colorado similarly in terms of their political leanings. However, Nevada is certainly much more of a swing state right now than the state of Colorado is, which is really interesting to note. However, in the state of Michigan, I would label the state of Michigan as lean in favor of the Democratic Party as well. In polling averages, Joe Biden is up over or around 10 points, which is really remarkable. However, it's not that surprising, given that Michigan is a state that typically votes for Democrats, went to Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012 by considerable margins. It's a state that typically votes for Democrats. Obviously, it flipped in the 2016 election to the surprise of very, very many. But I do believe that Joe Biden, his turnout in the state of Michigan in the 2020 Democratic primaries was extremely impressive. His performance there was very impressive. I do believe that the state of Michigan right now is a lean in favor of the Democratic Party. The final state that I would consider lean in favor of Joe Biden is the state of New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire was extremely close in 2016, about a 0.3 margin between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, but I do believe it is trending more and more blue in the 2020 election, a state that typically also votes Democrats, entrenched in the liberal Northeast. I think Joe Biden will win in that state by about 4 to maybe 5 points. 3 points would be a more conservative number. Now we move on to the states that I do believe are a lot more competitive in the 2020 election. The states of Arizona, Iowa, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Now, I do believe that these could very well be the tightest states in the 2020 election. Maybe if you also consider the states of Michigan, maybe Texas could be considered in there, New Hampshire, maybe Nevada. These are really extremely competitive states in the 2020 election. Now, the states of Iowa and Ohio I had previously labeled as lean in favor of the Republican Party, but I am shifting them both into the tilt margin as things stand right now, simply off the back of polling averages, which label both of these states as effective toss-ups. Now, Donald Trump performed extremely well in Iowa and Ohio in 2016, and I do believe he will carry both of these states again in the 2020 election unless he continues to slide, which I don't necessarily see happening. I think Donald Trump is at an all-time low right now, and as we sort of start to shift into the more competitive portion of the campaign trail, I do believe Donald Trump will start to close the gap. Now, how much he will start to close that 10 or 11 point national gap will remain to be seen, but I think Iowa and Ohio will go to the Republican Party in the 2020 election, but I do have to label them as tilt right now, given the polling averages and data across the country. The other states that I would label as tilt for the Republican Party right now is the state of North Carolina and the state of Georgia. Now, you might be surprised, given that Joe Biden does lead in both of these states in polling averages. However, they are by very marginal numbers. North Carolina is extremely competitive. I think North Carolina could very well be the closest race of the 2020 election, right there with the state of Florida. I think Georgia will also be extremely competitive, but maybe a little bit less competitive than states like North Carolina, Florida, maybe Arizona, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Now, North Carolina and Georgia are going to be extremely close states and really depend on turnout from the African American community in both of these states. If we see 2008, maybe 2012 turnout from the African American community in favor of Joe Biden in these states, we could see major upsets take place. But that will remain to be seen based on how the political sphere will be, or how the societal, cultural, and political sphere will be around November. That is really what this election is going to come down to. How long will this slide for Donald Trump and this boost for Joe Biden last? Now, moving on to the states that I would label as tilt for the Democratic Party. In the state of Arizona, I would label as tilt for the Democratic Party, as I would in the state of Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania as well, and in the state of Florida. I would label all 4 of these states as tilt for the Republican, or for the Democratic Party, that is. I also forgot to label Nebraska's 2nd congressional district as tilt in favor of the Republican Party. It'll be extremely close and interesting to watch what happens in Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, given how close it was in the 2016 election. Now, getting back to these tilt Democratic states, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Florida. These are extremely crucial states for Joe Biden in this 2020 presidential election, because if Donald Trump is able to win in these 3 states, he will win the election with 290 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 248. Now, this being said, however, as things stand right now, all 4 of these states are tilt in favor of Joe Biden, simply based off of polling averages as well as historical data. Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are typically more Democratic swing states. They typically vote for Democratic presidential candidates. Florida is always an effective toss-up and a key swing state in the elections, while Arizona is much more of a typically conservative and historically conservative and Republican state that has shifted dramatically since the last election, where Donald Trump won by about 3 points, to now having Joe Biden lead by about 4 points in polling averages. It may have you surprised to know that out of all 4 of these states, Joe Biden's lowest polling numbers are in the state of Arizona, where he's up about 4 points over Donald Trump. He's up about 7 points over Donald Trump in Florida, while he's up about 4 to 5 points in Pennsylvania and in the state of Wisconsin. Now, as you see right now, Joe Biden has 318 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 220 based on this forecast. Now, do keep in mind, this is with a huge asterisk. This is the best that the Joe Biden campaign will, in all likelihood, do in the 2020 election. I do believe that Donald Trump will begin to close the gap between Joe Biden and Donald Trump as we wind down in months down to the election on November 3rd, 2020. Now, it could very well get worse for him. It also very well could get a whole lot better. We don't really know what is going to happen, but based off of polling averages, historical trends, and current political data, this is the electoral map as things stand right now, according to myself and the algorithm I have in order to predict states. So, as you can see, 318 to 220. This is a big uptick from the last video, from where Joe Biden was at, I believe, 294 electoral votes over Donald Trump. So, I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Please make sure to like and subscribe. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I'll update this again in about 2 or so weeks, as long as you guys like this kind of video. So thank you guys all so much for watching. Please make sure to comment any suggestions you have for future videos as well, and tune in next time.